Hi there, Andre here from Peak Motorcycles. I'm back in the garage to do a follow-up video to the Rotopax fuel can that I fitted to my Honda CRF300 Rally on the Outback Motortek pannier frames. So when I put it on, a couple of things didn't quite look right. One of which was I thought it looked like it was overlapping a little bit with the swing arm. It was quite late when I finished. We had a horrible storm coming through and I just got tired of waiting for a gap when I would have a quiet enough garage. So I've left it for a night, put the video up. Thanks to everyone who's watched it and commented it and made suggestions on it. It just didn't sit right with me how it was fitted. So I've come out today to measure it up. I'm pretty sure it is overlapping with the chain guard, which probably means I'm going to have to revert to the plastic chain guard, which is perfectly serviceable, that came with the bike. So I'm going to put that back on. Hopefully that will then clear it. I did drop Outback Motortek a note to ask what their design tolerance was, and they said they did exactly the same as what I've done with a 1 gallon Rotopax tank, and they had about 20 millimeters of clearance. So that's kind of where I'm going for. It doesn't have to be 20. If I've got 10 millimeters of clearance, I think that will be enough. But it does have to be clear, and I don't think it is at the moment. If I can get it that far clear, what I'm actually going to do is use this round bracket that came with the Rotopax itself, because I think what that will do, it will actually mean that the bolts don't stick out quite as far. A few people had asked whether the bolt sticking out was actually going to interfere with the panniers and whether it could damage the panniers. I don't think it would, but that's because of the panniers I've got actually do stand a little way off because of how the brackets fit to the tubes. Having said that, by putting this on, it might move the whole thing in another millimetre or two. If I've got that much space to play with, then that might just be a nicer outcome in terms of mounting the fuel tank and having a little bit of a gap to put my panniers on. So that was it. Hopefully that's a quick explanation. I'm now just going to show you how I have measured it, and then I will go about replacing the bits. So hopefully you can see this all right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this ruler and I'm just going to put it down the back of the tank and just show you where it touches on the top of the chain cover. I've got the GoPro at the other end, so hopefully between these two angles you can see what I'm doing and how I'm measuring this. So I'm just going to put the ruler down the back. Hopefully you can see that. And that is now flush up against the back of the fuel tank. The fuel tank is flush up against the pannier frame, and that is very much in contact. You know, there's no chance, I think, that is going to put that on. So, you know, that's definitely over the edge. And then when there's these little bolts on the end there, I think those bolt heads are definitely going to hit the fuel tank. So I'm going to have to take that cover off and put the OEM one back on. I'm going to take this off. It's just 3 bolts, one here, one there. I'm not going to talk through this. I think I even did an install video, so you could always watch that if you're curious. So there we go, that's the H2C one coming off. So I'm just going to put the OEM one back on. Luckily I did manage to find all the bolts for it. It's always a bit of a worry when you take something off several months ago and then have to put it back together again. And actually this does look like it's sitting much further in than the H2C one was, which is promising. There we go, that's back on as it was. Now, before I put the that sort of mudguard back in there, I am just going to try it again and to see if the ruler will now go through. Oh yeah, so that looks a lot better now. Well, I say it looks a lot better. I mean, it is still on it. If you can see that on there with the OEM, it is actually touching. So it's not going to touch the chain. Let's make sure I've just got that flat. So, I mean, there is a gap there, and certainly with the plastic that's on there, that wouldn't break it. But the guys at Outback Motortek told me there was a 20 millimeter clearance, and, well, I'm not sure about that. Anyway, I think that's good enough. I'm happy to reassemble that, and I'm happy, I think, to ride it like that. I have seen that Zeta, or Zeta, depending how you say it, do one that is just a smaller wedge. That clips onto there, so maybe that would be a better option. But yeah, that is with OEM, and that is that is everything absolutely wedged up exactly as it is. And yeah, it does clear it. It just doesn't clear it by very much. So if that's a worry, maybe no chain guard is the way to go. But yeah, we'll see. I think I'm good with that. What I am just going to try and do is to put this mounting plate on. Now, because there's quite a big gap behind here, so my finger's in there, I don't actually think this is going to make it stick out any further, but it will get rid of these two on here, and I'll just have the flatter screws, I think, that will go through. We'll see. Now, what I had hoped to do was to use that plate on the back. I'll just take that off for a sec so you can see it. I know these bolts go the wrong way, but they've got the like coach bolts with a square bit on the other side. So what I had hoped to do was to take this plate that came with the Rotopax, which is the official Rotopax mounting plate, and basically just mount it on the back of there just to stand it off a little bit. What I have found, unfortunately, is that the holes on here in the Rotopax plate don't actually line up with the holes on the Outback Motortek frame, which I think they've put the holes in here to make those match and those match, but they don't line up with the actual ones on here. So what I can't do is now get that through. So that's too high. So in fact, none of those holes actually line up. So my idea of using that as a standoff ain't going to work. The only way it's going to work is actually if it goes through there. A bit of a shame, a bit of a design oversight, I think. But hey, what can you do? That's all back on. I'm just going to measure it one last time, just in case I've made a mistake, because it's, yeah, it's something where they said. So, okay, so that's pushing that down. That is absolutely flat against there. Now, in there is the tiniest of gaps. If I push it down. So I think that, okay, so it is basically touching here. So if that ever came up to the point where it would hit that, that's where it would catch. And I think that would push across. So I think it is safe to use. I wasn't sure. I nearly didn't bother putting the fuel can back on just because I thought that might hit. But I think that, you know, looking at that, the furthest most edge, which is where it would be the closest, is kind of there. If I slide that back, you know, I mean, it is touching kind of about here on the chain guard, but above that there is maybe a millimetre or so spare. So I'm going to give it a try and I'll let you know how I get on. So that's my short follow-up video about the Rotopax on my Honda CRF300 Rally on the Outback Motortek pannier frames. There's not a lot of clearance. I think there's maybe a millimetre, and I think it probably will touch if the suspension drops far enough. So yeah, it's not ideal. I had hoped for a bit more of a gap. What I would say is if you have an aftermarket chain cover, definitely check to see if it's going to touch. With mine, with the H2C one, I think there's probably 5 to 10 millimetres of overlap, especially with the bolt heads. So what you definitely don't want to be doing is having a piece of metal on your swing arm that's going to go up and hit the fuel tank. I think that could be bad in several ways. So don't do that. If in any doubt, measure it before you go out. And if you can, go back to OEM, because it does look like, even though it might touch, it's certainly soft, so it would move out of the way. So I'll let you know how I got on with my testing. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.